I see the icon.
Yes, it just takes a second for the YouTube to start, but yes, you should be good to go ahead and start your script.
Thank you. Well, welcome to commission members and the public that might be viewing the meeting of Holocaust and Genocide Education Commission. Before I get started, I will read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting that we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As the Senate member of, well, let's see, as a Senate member of this commission and the chairman of this commission, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to executive order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there's no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I'm confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We're utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and commission and selected legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously watch and or listen to the meeting on Zoom or YouTube and via phone by following directions and links that were provided in the General Court website. We've provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting in the Senate calendar, and we're providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during this meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem with access, please email, and the email address is remote, spelled out in R-E-M-O-T-E, Senate, spelled out, remote Senate at leg.state.nh.us, or you can call 603-271-6931 to report problems. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that any votes taken during the meeting shall be done through a roll call vote. And finally, let us start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state where they are and if anyone else is in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. So I am Jay Kahn. I'm present in my home in Keene, and my wife is elsewhere in the house. Representative Wolf.
Hi, Representative Dan Wolf. I'm in my office in New London, New Hampshire, and no one is in here with me.
Great, Dan. Good to see you. Representative Art Ellison.
Representative Art Ellison, I'm alone in my home in Concord, New Hampshire.
Thank you, Art. Ashley Harble.
Ashley Harble. I am in my home office in Goffstown, New Hampshire. My husband's working downstairs.
Thank you, Ashley. Brian Balke.
Good afternoon. I am in my office in Goffstown at the SAU 19 location, and I am alone.
Thank you, Brian. I hope everyone's well there. Dr. Jim Waller.
I am present and here in my office at Keene State College alone.
Thank you, Jim. Welcome. Marna Ducharme.
I'm Marna Ducharme, and I'm here alone in my office in Manchester, and my husband is downstairs.
Greetings, Marna. Bishop Peter Labashi. And I don't see him on the call right now. Tom White.
Tom White at home in Keene. My wife and son are in the other room.
Dina Chadowitz.
I'm Dina Chadowitz. I'm at home. My husband is upstairs, and I'm just wondering, are we also recording this?
Yes.
Okay.
You should see an icon live on YouTube in your screen. And Reverend Zachary Harmon.
Reverend Zachary Harmon here at my apartment in Manchester, and my wife is also in the apartment, though not in this room.
Welcome, Reverend. Rabbi John Spirasavat. Kati Preston. Kati listening via phone. Tom, have you heard from Kati?
I have not.
Okay. And Robert Truston.
Hi, good afternoon. Robert Truston. I'm at home alone in Dover, Massachusetts. Well, my daughter might be home from school soon.
Welcome, Robert. And Eve Gakunde.
Hi, I'm Yves Gakunde. I'm at the City Hall in Keene in my office, and I'm alone.
Thank you, Eve.
Welcome, Senator.
All right. And Sonia, if I see Ani Malakai, and I've invited the director of New Hampshire's Human Rights Commission to join us today. I know that others on the commission have expressed an interest in being informed by folks who are aware of some of the groups that have been affected by genocide and that live in New Hampshire, groups that might in an ongoing way experience forms of bias and discrimination, and felt like a high level of information that we might be able to hear about the state through our director of the Human Rights Commission. So I'm going to invite Ani to do a short overview of the commission, its work, and then for us to be able to engage with her about how our work with schools in education and wishing to honor the existence and harm of genocide, recognizing those events that occur on the calendar. We'll talk about those further in the meeting, but how her commission dovetails with some of the work that we're going to engage in through our work. Ani?
Greetings all. Thank you very much, Senator Khan. And thank you all for having me here with you today. So as Senator Khan stated, I'm the director of the New Hampshire Commission for Human Rights. And we'll start with the name and then work our way out. So the commission formed in 1965. And the purpose of the commission is to enforce the laws against discrimination that are state statutes. And for those of you who are the total nerds in the group and want to read up on the specific statutes, the statute that I operate under, which gives the commission jurisdiction, is RSA 354-A. So if you just do a quick internet search, you'll find the entire statute. You can go to our website, which is nh.gov/HRC. And yes, it looks like it's from the 1970s because we have not updated yet. But if you poke around on the left side, you'll be able to see some of some internal links on statistics, information on what we do, and see who our commissioners are. So the commission itself is operated under the guidance of 7 commissioners. These are all volunteers. They are appointed by the governor and confirmed by the executive council, and they each serve a 5-year term. And with that, the staff, which are state employees, are the ones that carry out the actual investigations. We receive the charges, docket those charges, and then do the investigation of those charges on behalf of the assigned investigating commissioner who would be assigned to a particular charge. At this point, we have 5 investigators, and we cover the entire state. So very small staff, and we do a lot of the work by phone. There are some face-to-face meetings. COVID makes it really interesting. We have a Zoom account, so we can meet people through teleconference. I can't think today, apologies. We can meet people through teleconference, or we can, if all parties are comfortable, set up a meeting and actually meet face-to-face in our office, taking appropriate precautions, of course. So let's jump into the actual work. And then if there are any questions about procedurally how we do what we do, I'm happy to answer those. So the work that we do is we base the parameters of what we do certainly on state statute, but it is in conjunction with the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So we focus primarily on employment, public accommodation, housing, and education was added to our state statute last year in September. Since education was added, and that's K through 12, public and private, we've only had, I can say statistically, because we have strict confidentiality, but if we were to look at our statistics from 2020, because we're in fiscal year 2021 at this point, we had 3 cases, one in the area of disability, one in the area of race, color, national origin, as it relates to harassment. And there was a 3rd case, please forgive me, I can't remember that one. It may have also been a disability case, but I'm not sure. It could have been mediated and then both parties settled. Our process to go through is there are no charges to anyone. You do not have to have an attorney to represent you. Customarily, if it's an individual that is filing a charge against a business, the businesses may have attorneys, and sometimes the individual will pick up an attorney as they move through our process. Some attorneys will wait until there is a probable cause finding, and then they will take the case for the individual. Some attorneys will take it up front, and we offer free mediation. So there is an opportunity for that individual, depending on the charge and their level of comfort, to potentially be made whole financially. I know primarily you all are dealing in the areas of all parts or all groups that have had racial bias that has led to genocide, and some of those the contributing factors along the way. We are a little different in that we specifically deal, based on our statute, with acts of discrimination in hiring, and it would be dealing with those immutable characteristics. So race, gender, religion is included, but sexual orientation, mental and disabilities, whether mental or physical, and there are a couple of other areas as well that are included in that. We partner with the EEOC, and that is our federal partner on the employment side, and we are striving to obtain a work share agreement with HUD to deal specifically with housing. We cover it anyway, but it would be even better to be able to partner with our federal housing partner. And that's all I have just right off the cuff, just a little bit about who we are. If there are any specific questions, I'm happy to answer those.
I have a question. How do most of the cases get resolved? Like, do people mediate? Like, how do you resolve them? Like, and what's the kind of breakdown of the intake?
Thought I unmuted. There are a couple of options. So once a charge is filed, and there's a very low threshold. So I work for a big box store, and I feel like I've been passed over for a raise or a promotion. And there are other people that look different than me that have started at the same time. We have worked the same schedules, and those people have been promoted and I'm still here. I may decide that based on whatever information I have, it could be race, it could be gender, it could be both. And I would then, the person, if they reach out to us initially, we ask them, have you talked to someone at your place of business? Because we're very strong in advocating for the internal process that is established at a business. So since we're using a business as this example, if they say, if I were to come back and say, yes, I've gone through that whole process, I've received no remedy, so now I'm going to the commission to file a charge. You can print off our questionnaire and then send that in to us. The intake person will reach out to get questions answered to make sure that they're clear. And in communicating with me, it's like, well, yeah, that does sound like you may have a charge of discrimination. And yes, I would say as the intake person, it could be based on race and gender. Now, that's just my side of it. And so as the commission, we take that charge. Once we get that information in and we docket that charge, we send the information to the employer in this example, and the employer has an opportunity to rebut that. And from that point, then it continues to move through our process. So to get to the answer to your question, so initially we will always offer mediation. We have, I believe at last count, 50 volunteer mediators. So these are attorneys, retired judges. Some of our mediators are professional mediators, and they volunteer their services to assist us. So that way there is no charge to any of the unrepresented complainants. And there's some business owners that are not represented as well. And so sometimes in that process, both sides are agreeable to mediation. If in the beginning of the process, you decide you want to mediate and you're sort of in the queue to get to an investigator, you don't lose your place in line. So you really don't have anything to lose by attempting mediation. And if the mediation doesn't work, if the case doesn't settle, then it will get assigned to an investigator who will look at the documents from the business, conduct interviews for any witnesses, request other documents from the employer, from the complainant, so that the investigator can look at both sides and go, well, I can understand why you thought this was discriminatory, but looking at your performance appraisals, you haven't met or exceeded expectations, and you've consistently been on a performance improvement plan, so there's no discrimination here. Or, wow, you've always exceeded expectations, and you've always been the first one to volunteer for things, to work extra hours. We don't see a reason other than what you're alleging potentially as to what has happened here. So if we find probable cause, then we move on to a hearing. And at any point, so after probable cause, the respondent can remove it from us, from the commission, and take it to court. And at any point, if the charging party decides that they want to go to court, they just let us know in writing and they can remove it and take the respondent to court. So the ways for resolution are, yes, it could mediate. If it doesn't, then it moves on through the system. There's an investigation that takes place. And then before a hearing, especially if probable cause is found, there's another opportunity for what's called a conciliation. And any of the attorneys will know that's really mediation after probable cause. So there's another opportunity to mediate, basically. Sometimes things settle there and they don't go to a hearing at all. And some people, either party, decide to remove it to court. So very long answer to a short question.
Thank you.
Ani, on the call, we've got Brian Balke is Superintendent of Public School. Representative Ellison has worked with the Department of Education before. And so I just to maybe suggest that there are others that are more informed than I about how schools report acts of bullying, hate that are reported to the schools. So, you know, if we were trying to assess 5 years from now that this commission and the rules that we hope to put in place in public schools for education, we wanted to observe that complaints had gone down, that the environment had improved. Any thoughts about how we might gauge that? What would be some of the metrics we might consider?
So from my perspective, and I would apply this same methodology to the workforce, to the adult world, with an opportunity to do, and part of our statute, our requirements are to do outreach, education, and training, and to make that sort of, to incorporate that into the everyday, even in a elementary through high school setting, so that people are aware of each other and that there's a wide variety of folks that are on the planet from a variety of places and ethnic and cultural backgrounds, and embracing them in a general sense, not necessarily setting something aside, but the more that there's a larger community built around the differences within said community, or if it's a more homogeneous community, pointing out that there are other people that look differently, think differently, culturally different from you, and using that as an opportunity to introduce youngsters to other folks on the planet. I think those are really good ways to build those bridges, so that, you know, if you're in a more homogeneous community in kindergarten through 4th grade, but when you go on to middle school, some middle schools start at 5th grade. So when you go on to middle school, because maybe you're in a different town, or your parents, you know, your family moves, and now you're in an area that is less homogeneous, this may be a bit of a culture shock. But if we've started back in kindergarten and we're talking about all the wonderfulness of cultures and looking at different places across the planet, I think incorporating that kind of information as children are growing makes a big difference. And then when you have charges or complaints that come forward, as those lessen, or even if, let's say the complaints are relative or are close to the same, the numbers are dropping, but it really is clearly, once you do some sort of internal investigation, that it is clearly a misunderstanding and not a situation of bias or discrimination. I think that is a way to also gauge, because it's hard. You're dealing with human nature. So it's not as easy as a math program. You know, if you're dealing with numbers and squiggles, building a website, if this thing doesn't, if you click it and it doesn't work, you automatically know what the problem is, and you can look through the code and figure out where the issue is and fix that code. People, unfortunately, well, fortunately, unfortunately, don't really operate that way, and it's more in the realm of human nature. And you can do the best you can to pour in to make those cultural changes, more accepting culture, to make these things okay to be different. But it really is about determining, maybe you all as a group, what those metrics look like. Certainly fewer charges, or things that are clearly misunderstandings, but it's working with the adults that work with the children to assist them in a really compassionate way to look at any biases or stereotypes or thoughts or any of those topics to help them put them in a better place to be able to engage in a more profound way with the students so they can carry that forward.
Others with, yeah, Eve.
Thank you, Senator. I have a quick question in terms of how many cases roughly do you get in, let's say, in the last 5 years? How many cases have you had? And how many of those cases went to mediation?
That is a good question, and that's kind of tricky. So I believe, and I can certainly email you back with more specific information. I believe for 2020, our percentage of mediation went up. I want to say, I think it was maybe 65% of our cases mediated. It could be a little higher. I don't think it was lower than that. And I'd have to really look to see what the numbers are for 2019. So I began with the commission in 2018. And when I started, the commission has always had a mediation program. But what the assistant director and I did was move forward with making our offices available for mediation. And the moment that we did that, we saw a huge uptick because some people are solo practitioners. I know I'm saying that wrong. So for the attorneys, please correct me. But when you have you're one attorney practice, if they work from their home, they don't want to have random strangers in their home. And so there was sometimes difficulty finding places for them to mediate. Because we opened our offices to allow that to take place, it opened it up. I mean, and people were hungry to mediate. A lot of people wanted to put the issue behind them to be able to be made whole and to move on. And so we had more mediations. The way in the past that we have worked our numbers, we have an annual contract with the EEOC to complete X number of cases. And so last year, meaning fiscal year 2020 or federal fiscal year 2020, we closed 200 cases. And actually above that number, I think maybe 25 of those cases or an additional 25 cases were state only. So depending on certain jurisdictional issues, some cases, some charges that we have are only New Hampshire, and some we will dual file with the federal government. So last year alone, we did 200 dual file cases and 25 state only cases. The year before that, we had, I believe, 165, somewhere in that number. So every year, the contract number that we complete for the federal government changes slightly. It doesn't mean that cases stop coming in. It means that we complete that contract and then we begin anew with a new contract. So I'm not sure if that actually answers your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you. How big is your staff?
That's another great question. So there are 5 investigators. There's myself and the assistant director. And then I'm soon to be hiring 2 new people for intake. I'm changing our process just a little bit to better facilitate how we're processing our cases. And then we have an office manager that we still need to hire, and a receptionist that we still need to hire. So, excuse me, I think that's probably 11 total, somewhere in there. So it's really small, but people who are actually doing the investigation, there are 5 investigators.
Other thoughts from folks? Good. Ani, I'm thinking about the educational materials that we'll be putting together, at least references for educational materials. And is that something that you have cataloged for your purposes, for the educational outreach that you indicated previously?
So, and maybe I misspoke. So education, meaning educating businesses about best practices, and educating employees on knowing what their rights are, knowing that they should have a safe workplace, that they should not have harassment of any kind, knowing if someone speaks to you a particular way, what your remedies are. So that was where I was speaking in terms of education. So educating the public on their general rights, and as well as understanding what the commission does and how we intervene in a process, how we step in, and then providing training. We do a lot of sexual harassment training for businesses, whether it's for just their general staff, whether it's for management. We provide that training, and we do housing training as well. So,
And is there a place on your website that, for instance, the rights in the workplace, the rights for housing, I mean, these just might dovetail with some of the curriculum of trying to inform people, not just about what not to do, but what to do in the event that you feel that you're experience this later in your life.
yes. So on the website, there is information relative to disability in general. So what it is, what the interactive process is. So whether you're an employee or an employer, you can go to the site and have just some good general information there. And there is information on pregnancy and what that looks like in the workplace. And there's also some other very general information in terms of understanding what is correct or not correct, along with dealing with needing to revamp the website. It is also some of the flyers that we have available in the office are things that are in the office and need to be added in an easier form on the website. So the information is there. You have to poke around a little bit for it, but the goal would be to make it a lot easier to find. You know, literally the Know Your Rights flyer. Click here and you have that. Some of that basic information. And people can always send an email to the commission itself. We have a general email box, as well as calling. If you're an employer and you have someone that needs an accommodation and you're just not quite sure what you should do, we do not give legal advice, but we can talk relative to the law, what the individual employer is legally responsible to do for that employee. And also if an employee has a question relative to what the employer should do, they can reach out to us as well. And our contact information and email addresses and everything are on the website. But if there's another something that I need to pull together to help and to integrate it into what you're doing, then I'm very open to doing that, because I'm sure it would be something we'd need anyway.
Thank you. No other hands raised. Ani, thank you for all that you do for protecting people in our state. And I'm trying to mediate these important issues. So I know I found you an important resource in the past, and I appreciate that you've introduced yourself and the role of the Commission on Human Rights to this group. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for having me. I am available for any questions that you might have. And as you all move through your process, if there's some things that you think we could work on together, or something, information that you need from the commission in order to support some of the work or the efforts that you're doing, or documentation on something, please do not hesitate. Reach out and I'll put our best minds on it. Okay, that's me and Sarah, but the two with the most available time. But I'll do the best I can to get you what you need in a timely fashion. So thank you all very much.
May I ask what your email address is?
Yes. So it is, you ready? Ani, AHNI .n.Malachi, MALACHI @hrc.nh.gov. They just changed, you're welcome. They just changed our email addresses.
I see your middle initial is N as in nose.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
for coming. Thank
Absolutely. My
Yeah,
pleasure.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. For the record, we'll recognize that Rabbi John Spiro Sabat has joined us. And Rabbi, just want to indicate where you are and if anybody else is present with you.
And nobody is with me.
I'm sorry, you're where?
At my home in Nashua, and no one is with me.
Thank you. Moving along on our agenda, I hope that was helpful. I find her a good resource always. I guess I was surprised to learn that education had not been a part of their investigative role, except unless it was an employer-related complaint. Anyway. Moving on, we have our minutes that I guess we should do a quick roll call and confirm that we've had a chance to review those. Any corrections to the minutes? I appreciate the detail again, Dina. Okay, somebody make a motion to approve the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you, Eve. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. By, who did that?
Jim Waller.
Thank you, Jim. I gotta do a roll call. Marna?
Accept.
Yeah. Vote yes. Art?
Yes.
Dina? Yes. No?
Yes.
Reverend Harmon?
Yes.
Eve?
Yes.
Ashley?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Ben?
Yes.
All right, we've got a unanimous vote. All right, moving on. Turning to Superintendent Balke. A lot of our minutes had to do, sorry if I caught you at the wrong moment.
Oh, that's okay. I just, sorry about that.
All right. A lot of our minutes had the record of our talking with the Department of Education and Nat Green. I was in touch with Nat just before this meeting to see if the social sciences standard had been issued or there was anything to share with us. He said not. So I assume, I don't know if you've been able to put your hands on that. Anyway, turn the next part of the meeting over to you for the couple of topics that you've brought forward from the work group on policies.
Great, thank you, Senator. So I'll just have a very quick update on the policy status, and then I will turn this over to Ashley for some discussion around the minimum standards. So our subcommittee essentially has two primary outcomes that we've been working on And in the order that we're working on them, the first is to make recommended changes to the minimum standards, which is ED 306, that would need to go on to the State Board of Education for their approval. And then beyond that, it would need to go on to the Joint Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules. So we're working on the language that we're going to recommend to the full commission to bring forward to the Department of Ed and to the State Board of Education. And the policy piece, the statute recommends a school district to accept and to adopt a policy with respect to Holocaust and genocide studies. We are going to do that after the process goes through the state board and JALCAR. So we think it makes good sense for us to focus our efforts now on the recommended changes to ED 306. So we have been working on language, and Ashley did a great job putting together a draft. And so, Senator, if I may, I'd like to turn it over to Ashley and have her go through and give a brief overview. I would say to the collective group that we're still very much in the draft process. We have a meeting scheduled the first week of January that Nate Green from the Department of Ed is going to join us and give us some input from the department's perspective. But we wanted to get some general input from the full commission and make sure we're essentially on the right track. So with that, I will pass it off to Ashley. Ashley?
Hi, everyone. All right, so what I did was when I was putting together kind of pieces of this policy, as a group, we decided to go the route that was to put a section in the minimum standards instead of tacking it on to things that were already there. So very similar, if you remember, to the when Nate was here, he talked about like the computer science example and how that was kind of a standalone block. We decided to go that route to try to offer flexibility. And like Brian just said, like the language of this, it's very much in draft form. We know that we have a lot of work to do as far as like the language piece and really making sure that we're saying exactly what we want to say. But I think from you all, we want just some feedback on, did we kind of hit everything that as a group, as a collective, we think should be in the minimum standard? So I'm going to share my screen and kind of show you what we're working with. So this is our first draft. Notice this says draft in large letters up top. So we broke it down into kind of a couple different sections, and we used the current minimum standard language and structure from multiple different examples. So when I was structuring this, I looked, for example, at the computer science example, the physical education, the science example. So I looked through the entire minimum standards and really tried to pull language and structure from that when creating this so that hopefully it fits seamlessly in. The first two sections, so A and B, we're still, again, working on the language piece of it. And there's some stuff that we need to go back into the statute to confirm and make sure that the language is the same. Anything that's in red from here was pulled out from either the language of the statute, the language of the bill, or the language of the, was it the focus? That first paragraph, what did we call that?
Findings and purposes,
yes.
Findings and purpose, something like that.
So the findings paragraph that came with the bill. So anything in red is like direct language from our resources. So A and B really talks about like when and where we think that this should be happening. So we have that each district shall establish and provide a comprehensive Holocaust and genocide education curriculum implemented by at least 8th grade and continuing through grade 12. So it's happening sometime in middle school as well as in high school. And then we put in that it also, we wanted to see it somewhere in the social studies and or ELA curriculum. And in addition, if you can also add it across the curriculum. And then the second piece B is that each district, so this speaks to high school, shall incorporate curriculum on Holocaust and genocide studies into some existing course that is currently required of high school graduation. So basically creating some sort of unit or implementation in a course that already exists. So districts don't have to create a new course or a standalone course, but can embed it in something But this way, if it's a course that's required condition of high school graduation, that means that every student will then get this curriculum, which was something that we thought was really important. Like we didn't want to put it into an elective English course or an elective social studies course. We wanted to make sure it was a course that was required by all students. This next part, so the C section, sorry, my mouse is being a little funky. So the C section.
Ashley, can I ask a quick question, or do you want to hold questions until the end?
If it's about the top two things, we can ask them now.
Yeah, it's about the top two.
Yeah.
I was looking back on the commission, and there wasn't a age or grade restriction to the commission's work. And I know here at Keene State, we actually had Holocaust and Genocide Studies approved for the elementary education certificate before we had it for the secondary education one. Is there a reason that we're looking just at grade 8?
So it's by at least 8th grade, and there is language somewhere. I don't remember exactly where we pulled that from. It might be in one of the statutes that this got put into. There is language in one of the pieces that says by at least 8th grade and continuing through grade 12. It might be in the 193E that it got put.
It's in the other one. It's in 180.
Okay.
And it's in the statute on history. So there's 2 statutes that this amended. One that is like the general criteria for an adequate education, and one that's directed at US and world history. And it's in that latter one that the requirements are not later than 8th and continuing through 12th. And that's something that I think our group has to talk more about, how we can require the education in younger grades and in English language arts. So maybe we would break up A into 2 parts. One that allows this to be, or requires this to be taught earlier in whatever class, and one that requires it to be taught not later than 8th in history or government. But yeah, that's where that not at least by 8th comes from.
Yeah, so that's, like Dina said, that was a question that we're still looking at. We need to go back through all of the language and kind of see where we are, and also make sure that we're not overstepping what the statute says. So that's on our agenda for next time, is to look at that language, as well as the language of the in social studies and or ELA. And I know that that was a conversation that we want, we're going to get Nate's feedback on too, because it says social studies standards in the statute, can we also then pull out the ELA part? So we're like that piece of it, the grades and the where, we just want to get some feedback from Nate as he reads through it from the Department of Ed standpoint. But Jim, that's also a question that we have. So we're going to go back in, and that's definitely a part that we're going to look at, because we agree that there should be, 8th grade's a little late to start some of this stuff. So we definitely agree with that.
Ashley, let me try to address your question about English language arts. The standard here, while it is under social sciences and history, or along with history, it doesn't mean that civics can't be taught someplace else. It doesn't mean that. I think if we follow the words too closely, too literally, and I don't think Nate Green was leading us down that path. I think he was saying that interdisciplinary studies were legitimate, and that we shouldn't find ourselves too hemmed in by that.
And that's kind of where I took it too. So when I was writing this language here, the in social studies and or language arts and across the curriculum, I felt like that really got to the heart of what Nate was saying to us. But we're just going to cross-reference that with him just to make sure when we meet with him on the 5th. But I agree, Jay, that I don't feel like it's as binding, and I don't want to pigeonhole us into just the social studies piece of it. So this way it kind of broadens it a little bit. The C section just speaks to that policy piece. We have not written a policy yet, but that we will be recommending that a policy goes into school boards. And then the D section is really kind of like the meat of the whole thing. So this talks about what should be included in the Holocaust and genocide studies. A lot of this language is pulled from the findings and from the statute itself. So I tried to pull as much language as I could. So I broke it down into 3 different sections. So this section I here really focuses on kind of like the historical piece of Holocaust and genocide, looking at the terms of genocide and Holocaust. So I referenced section 193E, which is where the definitions for both genocide and Holocaust are housed based on the statute. The historical facts about the Holocaust and genocides, the way that the intolerance, bigotry, et cetera, have evolved in the past and how they can evolve into genocide, and how the causes of Holocaust and genocide, and the causes of Holocaust and other genocides and the consequences. So that's kind of more like the historical piece. So making sure that somewhere in that education, you know, it's not just like a remembrance day, but you are also teaching the history piece behind it. So that's this first section, the I. The second section here, and again, like we still are going through and adding the language, and we'll probably add a little bit more and kind of change up some of the language. The second section is more the how. So if the first section is more, okay, the history and the facts, this second section here really speaks to how how a teacher would go about teaching these things. So building opportunities in your classroom for students to build and construct knowledge and understanding of the impact of intolerance and bigotry, that focus on developmentally appropriate activities, which Jim kind of goes to your thought of like looking at younger grades and then older grades. And then the best practices committee will talk about that a little bit too. And then looking at experiences and interactions with primary documents, witness testimony, historical documents, making sure to include the witness testimony. And I think the primary documents is really important when teaching any sort of Holocaust or genocide education. So that's kind of the how. And then the last section is more like the impact on our world today. So what lessons, what are we learning from studying Holocaust and genocide, and how are we applying that to the world that we live in? So that's this, this section here. So what are kind of like the goals at the end of a unit on Holocaust and or genocide studies? So it would be to look at the fragility of democracy, how like democratic institutions are not automatically sustained, but you need active civic responsibility. Looking at intolerance, bigotry, anti-Semitism, et cetera, and how that evolves and how we can prevent the evolution of such things, and then understand the power of individual choices in preventing genocide. So first section, really looking at like the history and the facts. Second section, looking at how are we getting this knowledge to students? And then third section, what are kind of those big picture, like essential questions in teaching terms that I would want my students to have addressed by the end of a unit. So that's where we landed.
Can I just add one thing, Ashley?
Yes.
I just wanted the commission to know that we took there were 2 different approaches that we could have taken here. We could have taken existing elements within ED 306, the minimum standards, and added the requirements in the statute to existing parts of the rules. We thought it was more appropriate to have sort of a standalone section where all of the components around Holocaust and genocide education were contained within one individual section, as opposed to just adding things on that already existed. So philosophically, we took that approach and we thought it was important. So I just wanted to share that as well.
And I guess any feedback, again, like language tweaks, we're not even there yet, but as far as like content or anything like that, looking for feedback.
I have.
Go ahead, Dina.
No, I just actually, Ashley, could you send me this version so I can attach it to the minutes? And
This should be the same version that you got.
well, there are a couple, we're circulated a couple versions, so I just want to make sure.
I didn't add any of the changes that we emailed today. I left it as it was yesterday because we didn't get to talk about the group about making any of those other changes. So this is what you have from yesterday.
Yeah. Okay. My other question was to Jay. I understand what you're saying, what you said earlier. I'm wondering, did you have a suggestion with respect to the language?
I think that's inclusive enough. I've got a couple other comments, but I'd like to hear from others. Bob, I saw you're, and it's a little hard to see. So, folks,
Yeah, I had a question.
You have a little disorder here.
Do you want me to stop sharing, or do you want me to keep it up so you can reference it?
Yeah, why don't you stop sharing and then we can.
I can pull it back up if people need me to.
Robert.
Thank you, Senator. So I just had a question, Ashley, around the creation of the policy, because I don't know what's involved in actually creating a policy around this, and I don't know if like that means creating a model policy. I just want to be mindful of like not create, and you everyone who works in a school probably knows more about this than I do. I just don't want to I just want to be mindful of like balancing the education part to creating a policy, because sometimes people push back on like, I have to create a new policy. So I'm just not sure what's intended in that language.
I'll take that if you want, Ashley. The statute specifically says that school districts are recommended to have a policy. So policies for school districts need to be adopted by the school board. There's a whole process. Each school board has to go through and adopt policies. We would be looking to create a model policy, and there are different kinds of policies. There are policies that are required by law, and then there are other policies that are recommended, and then there are other policies that are more kind of optional. So this would fall in the recommended category. After the minimum standards in ED 306 have been addressed and hopefully adopted, recommended by the state board, and then ultimately adopted by the Joint Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, we would work with the New Hampshire School Boards Association. We're hoping that they're going to be able to work with us, and we would draft a model policy that school districts could review and consider. And each school district would have the ability to make a more expansive policy if they were so inclined. But given that this is not required, it's recommended only, there will be a number of school districts that likely will not adopt a policy because they only do so for ones that are required by statute or by administrative rule.
But I just think it's important to note that even if they don't adopt a policy, this wording will still be in the minimum standards and still be required, even if they don't adopt a formal policy. It's required through the minimum standards. So a policy is just kind of like a second check almost, because it's already required. And then a policy is like an additional, like, yes, we see it, and yes, we're doing it. I guess, Brian, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. The other thing is, school districts can decide that this is a topic they'd like to go deeper into. So their individual local school board policy could be more expansive than the elements that are contained within the ED 306 rules. So I would say Ashley's assessment is correct.
Yeah, I mean, I support it. I think it's a good approach, and it has a built-in level of accountability, and also the way you broke down that the A and B, I think it was very consistent with the discussion that we had at the last meeting about providing, teachers with sort of the options about how to get this content actually into a classroom.
Hey, can I, Jay, is it, my son has entered the room and is sitting here. Is that okay?
I'm not offended by that.
Oh, no, I mean, you ask us to say who's in the room with us.
It's
So.
for the record,
Okay.
and So recognized. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Dina, I just sent you a PDF of what I just shared.
Thank you. Thanks, Ashley.
Does anybody want to see A and B of what Robert just referenced? No, okay, continue on. Reverend Harmon, yeah.
Senator Khan. I just wanted to say, one, it really makes sense to me to treat it like the computer science standard, because this feels like we have some more freedom to specify what we want to do. And so that makes sense to me. So I want to affirm that. One thing that we've been talking about in the implementation committee, and not just myself, but others, their subcommittee, is also kind of that the Indigenous experience does connect with the land and the places that we're actually at in New Hampshire. And I know that we don't want to, we want to be very careful not to exceed the language of the statute. But in section I, it seems like there might be some room for giving some examples or options just to get people thinking. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a possibility.
Good one, Ashley. Yeah.
So I was actually thinking something similar, and I guess that was a question that I had for the group, because I know that the statute just says genocide, right, which is very general. But do we want to put any language in there that maybe specifies, like language that says like, which could include, and then list? I don't know. I don't know if we should, if people felt like we should include language that kind of specifies that a little bit more, because Reverend Harmon, I was thinking the same thing, that, we want to make sure that it's not just the Holocaust, right? That we're also looking at other genocides and making sure that other voices are heard as well, and being respectful, especially of the land that we're on.
If I can echo on that remark, I was thinking about current genocides. And anyway, I'll just leave it at that. That may stretch the thought enough to make us think about some of the ethnic, racial, religious strife that exists in our current world.
Well, I've run into, once you start listing, there's always a question about who's missing. So I'll just sort of flag that as, we should just be cautious about that approach. I mean, I agree with what everyone is saying. So I think we should just be cautious about that, because it's hard to list everything, and then you run the risk of, somebody or somebody's group may have been left out. And genocide is a personal, we're talking about human dignity here, and so we don't want to sort of send the wrong message that we're only talking about certain groups. So I'm not sure I know the exact way to handle it, but I think, and I know that a number of states around the country have sort of gone more with an adoption of just a definition of genocide. The other thing that it does do is it does provide some additional flexibility for educators to kind of, decide how they want to do it. So there could be a Holocaust novel, but it could be something about Rwanda or Sudan as well. So, Ashley or Marna, I don't know if you have a perspective on that, because you're in a classroom.
I was actually going to say that perhaps with the materials that we are starting to call, that a lot of that can come under there. So we don't have to specifically state in the policy the different atrocities, but we can offer materials that go along with various ones. And so we have already started to put together some lists, and we do have some materials that already address things that are other than the Holocaust. So that's in the works. I mean, there is always there's always something that could be left off of that list as well. But at least if we're putting together these materials for best practices, a lot of that could be addressed in that sense.
And we do have in the part D, section I, where it talks about the section 193E. Those are the definitions of both the Holocaust and genocide that are in the statute. So making sure that also allows us to have these common definitions across the whole state, which I think is really important because precision of language is so important when teaching the Holocaust and genocide studies. So we have those definitions within there too. And those are the ones that were through the statute.
The issue that was raised at the hearing was, or one of the issues raised at the hearing was the Palestinians. And I think, and one of the things that I said is that though I think that raising these issues means that the discussion of is that a genocide, is any other thing going on a genocide or that has gone on, is part of what it means to learn something, is to figure out how to apply the concepts. And obviously I would be uncomfortable listing that as a genocide, and specifically, which is why, also kind of like Robert, I'm a little concerned about that path, but I think that is most likely to be the specific issue that's raised, and that is always raised in these contexts. But I certainly don't want to shut down discussion of anything, because there's certainly things that are in the realm of racism and hate that are directed by Palestinians, by Jews, by Israelis. So, but I don't want to, I want to figure out the appropriate way at whatever appropriate time to figure out how that fits in if that issue comes up when we present our things or when teachers or anybody raises those issues.
It's also raised by indigenous people to America, Native Americans. At least it has been raised. I don't think it's really been raised in New Hampshire, but it has been raised in other states that have, worked on this issue.
Sort of why and maybe the current events, but I mean, India, and the conflicts around religion and equal rights. He can go to Sudan, and I mean, these issues are current. They're with us, and I guess so. I'll just leave that. I've already said that once, but the computer science curriculum, I believe, had an elementary requirement and a secondary requirement. I think it broke it down in that manner. And I guess I just want to ask that question about, some households, parents, they may be rather averse to current events and challenging those. High school curriculum might be different, where current events and the exploration or the use of knowledge to current events could be a more specific curricular issue. So did the group give some consideration that the standard might address what is appropriate for pre-high school curricula and what would be appropriate for high school?
So we kind of wrote it open-ended that like by the end of their 12 years, these are the things that need to be addressed. And then in the best practices, when we create the resource guide, I know that the best practices committee talked about like breaking down into different subsections and different kind of grade categories about what's developmentally appropriate. And in the standard, we use that language, or in the minimum standard that was written, we do use that language of like developmentally appropriate activities. I was cautious about breaking it down into like elementary school, middle school, and high school, simply because like when you get to the elementary school level, at least like in my experience, and Jim and Tom, you might have different experience like at the Cohen Center, but in my experience and with most of my training, as far as like Holocaust education goes, like you have to be really cautious when you're getting into the elementary schools. And it's more about like anti-bullying and stereotypes and prejudice than it is about the actual Holocaust or genocides, which is still very valid, but is that a different thing than, I don't know, is that a different thing than what our statute is, I guess was the question with that, because it felt a little bit different. And I didn't want to say that, you know, in elementary school, you have to do this like SEL, like social emotional learning, like bullying stuff. And then in high school, you get into, you know, the historical facts. Those seemed separated from each other. Definitely open to the discussion. It wasn't something that we had talked about though in the group.
Well, I think we have.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to add that we tried to mirror the timeline that was identified within the statute. So the language that we proposed had that concept of sort of no later than 8th grade, but that mirrors the language in the statute. Certainly school districts would have the ability to go beyond. They can make as comprehensive a local curriculum and instructional plan as they'd like, but we tried to follow the language within the statute. Marna, anything to add to that? I thought you'd be a good person to speak to this.
Well, what we had discussed was that across, like, I shouldn't say across the board, but in many middle schools, 8th grade is US history, and it's usually French and Indian War, like older US history. So they're not getting into the world wars, and they're not getting into overseas genocides. By far, they can definitely talk about indigenous peoples, but they're probably not covering that. So in middle school, however, there is geography that's taught in 6th and 7th grade. And along with the geography, we cover a lot of cultures, and it does come up in those grades. So I would say that more than likely you are finding it in the middle schools. The language says no later than 8th grade. So that does, as an umbrella, it does cover those other grades, but it is more likely to happen before 8th grade anyway. But I don't know that the language has any bearing on that, because it does take place with or without that if classes are teaching their human geography the way that they should be. And those things should be coming up between human interactions. So it depends on the curriculum that's been adopted by the different districts and how it's being implemented. And it does already take place in a lot of schools, but not all. But again, the statute and how it reads, you know, moving forward, it still allows for what's happening to happen, and then potentially open it up for additional lessons to be added. So I don't think it's too restrictive, but I do think that it doesn't hit the grade that it's probably being taught in. So, you know, it's a little bit of both. It's happening before 8th grade, but I don't think that the language matters if we're saying by 8th grade. Dina?
Yeah, so listening to what everyone's saying and going back to Dan's question and what Dr. Waller asked, I'm wondering, and what Jay said about reading the act flexibly, I'm wondering if we should rethink the not later than 8. I mean, if you blend 183 and 190, whatever, together, maybe we could write into this standard that like not later than 6th grade. This Holocaust and genocide education should be taught, and not later than 8th through 12th needs to be taught in, also needs to be taught in history. I mean, maybe we should reconsider that and add in 6th grade and see what happens.
Yeah. I think the reason that we put the not later than 8th grade is that it would require more school districts in the state to consider both the curriculum and the policy. Otherwise, we just cut it off, and it's just 80 schools in the state that would need to do it. And as part of that rationale.
Because I'm sorry, I don't get that. Probably because I have no background in the school system.
Well,
Are you saying that the reason why we used 8th grade in the bill is, are you referring to the language we used in the bill or in this?
Yes.
The bill doesn't actually refer to 8th grade. It just it adds a requirement to 180 whatever,
89.
which is the history portion, and that existing statute uses the language not later than 8th. So I'm sorry, I just don't. Can you restate what you were saying? I don't understand. You're saying that we added 183 to the bill to limit the number of schools?
It made the number of schools,
don't.
Dina, it made the number of schools bigger because it required middle schools as well as high schools.
Mm-hmm.
But Jay's saying if we didn't have that language, it would have been limited. Like high schools could have looked at that and it could have only been limited to like there's like 80 something high schools in the state. But because we put the language of 8th grade, it actually expands the number of the schools that have to look at the statute and actually enact it because it added middle schools to that language.
So I'm asking something different though, in light of what Dr. Waller said and what Dan said about how these concepts of tolerance and it's important to study them earlier than 8th grade. And in light of what Jay had said earlier about the need to read the bill flexibly, why not? I'm just posing the question that was posed at the very beginning of this conversation. Why not just change not later than 8th to not later than 6th?
I'm just going to throw that out there that maybe that's a conversation that we have in the policy.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that seems like a really big conversation.
Yeah, it is. But I was wondering what people thought.
And we're also going, like, I have it in my notes of things to like look at with the policy so that we can revisit it. And it's something, Dina, that you had brought up. And I think Ryan, in your notes too, like both of you had added questions about that language. And I think that we weren't firm on the grade language when we were looking at it yesterday. So I think it's definitely something for us to think about. And I also think it's something for us to ask Nate his opinion about, because he has experience like with these minimum standards and what will work best for school districts and what will have the most impact. So I think that might be a really great question for him to get his perspective on, because like I don't know the answer. Like I don't know how much of a difference the language of before 8th grade or after 6th, like I don't know how big of a difference that will make to school districts. So I think that will be a good question for him.
Other members? One of the things I'm thinking, Brian, Ashley, that we might want to notice in the calendar, we've got enough time between here and your meeting, which is going to be when?
January 5th.
No. January.
January 5th. It's the week after New Year's.
Yeah. It's the Tuesday after. Anyway, we might just that if other members of the commission wanted to sit in and hear this, at least we would have publicly noticed the meeting. We won't need to worry about a quorum. And I guess the problem is that we can't put it. All right. Let me
Yeah, think about that, because there's 6 people on the committee. So if we add a few more people, then it'll have to be.
And Nate will be
we
there too.
noticed, and I think we were
Yeah.
also told that we may not get support. So I'm not sure how we notice the address for listing the public. To
Yeah.
listen to. All right, well, I'll research that.
But before we leave the policy committee, I just had a question for Robert. You had said that that you were talking about Indigenous people and had said something about other states have considered this question. I wasn't sure what was the question, whether exactly that you
Well, the question was whether we should have a sort of articulated list of genocides.
Okay, all right.
So it's just if we list five other groups of people will say why am I not listed as my experience less value. So that's really the concern. I was just wanting us to be cautious about.
I wondered if there was another question about whether what happened to Indigenous people constituted a genocide.
Well, I wasn't raising it as a question, but I know, in the same way that Rabbi Sabat raised the issue of people, getting into a discussion about Palestinian and whether or not there's a genocide there. There is definitely an active discussion about whether or not Indigenous people were the victims of a genocide. I'm not making a position on it, but I'm just saying it's definitely a discussion that many are engaged in.
Okay, thank you.
I think the work that you're doing is really important. I noticed in our minutes, and Brian, and Ashley, I think you are trying to work to a timeline, a deadline, and this is such an important part of our work that it's important to get it right before we seek broad input, open hearings, meaning on some rules. So, but I appreciate that you're trying to move forward. You're trying to get things on paper so that we can, as a group, try to move towards consensus. That's great. Okay, I think we've covered that one. Yeah, covered the topic well. And thank you for bringing the input. So on best practices, and I'm not sure who's convening that group at this point. That's what I thought. But is there any update on best practice?
Yep. So we've actually met twice because we had a meeting right after our last full commission meeting. So we've met twice. We kind of identified our two charges. So the first one is identifying best practices and appropriate number of hours at multiple grade levels. We put that on hold because we felt like the policy piece and the minimum standard piece needed to be written first before we can even approach, how many hours and what grades and those kind of things. We wanted to see that language first. And then we talked a lot about building some sort of like New Hampshire resource guide that kind of will house a whole bunch of different resources, which could include like definitions and include different professional development opportunities, and kind of categorize that both by grade level or like grade band levels, developmentally appropriate age levels, as well as like categories for where they might fit into covering Holocaust and genocide studies. We're also starting to create a list of like books and poems and movies that teachers could use during their teaching time. That's something that I feel like people always want, and Myrna has started creating kind of that list for us. And then we kind of left off with people are doing some research. So Tom and Kati were doing some general research of genocide curriculum. focusing on like outside Holocaust education and what's out there for resources. And then Robert and John were doing some research into what other different state commissions were doing. So, you know, do they have research or resource guides? Do they have, you know, what do they have in place? What kind of professional development do they have in place for other states that have passed a bill? And then Marna and I have started bookmarking away different resources, and Marna created a spreadsheet for us, and we have a Google Drive that's kind of housing all of our information and ideas. And we have another meeting on January 7th. It's gonna be a very meeting filled week. So January 7th, we have another meeting for best practices where hopefully we'll have some information about what other states are doing, and we'll start looking at that information.
Ashley, I've got some of the research. I just wasn't sure how to upload it. So I'll email you
Perfect.
after.
Sounds good. That's all I got.
I think that's these efforts obviously are not independent, and I guess I'd ask when you do talk with Nate Green on the 5th, asking him if the available resources would be valuable to accompany the rules, so that there'd be evidence that this is not as heavy a lift as it might be if people were unaware of the amount of resources that are available.
Definitely. And I think that we are thinking too, once the policy is written, really taking some of those different categories in the policy. So some of the, you know, the section I, the section 3I, and really pulling out some of those category headings and kind of creating a resource guide that makes sure that we kind of hit on all of those things. So really, like, the policy is kind of going to lead some of our work with it, where we're trying to just collect everything that we can right now, so that once the policy is written and once we start getting that to the state board, we can follow up with this resource guide.
And I guess my point would be, it may not be a follow-up, it may be an appendix. But let's hear what kind of precedent there's been set with other rules that introduce new curriculum. If I can back up a second, who's hosting the January 5th policies?
Dina's the one that's been creating the Zooms.
Dina, is that a personal Zoom account?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Anybody else? All right. And I see Tom and Jim have both left the call.
Well, I have a question. So Dr. Kigundi and Reverend Harmon and I are on the implementation committee too. Maybe Reverend Harmon could give a summary. I just, my mind is fried. I'm actually think I'm going to get tested for COVID. But I wanted to ask on that. We were talking about creating a website, and I had asked Alan before he left, and he had said that this was creating a Facebook page or creating a website for our commission would be something that you, Jay, would have to ask the legislative office or the Senate. So I had sent you an email on that and wanted to follow up. I think we all agreed that having a website where we could post what the commission's doing and the list of resources and days when commemoration days of different genocides would be a really good thing. So do you, Jay, would you like me to contact somebody? And if so, who, or do you have some time to do that?
Yeah. Well, actually, thank goodness bill writing is done, or not done, but at least submitted. Anyway, I'll take that one on. And is Robert still on? Robert, I guess I'd like to talk with you about the possibility there too.
Okay. I can add a little bit too about the implementation subcommittee if
Yeah, please do. Please do, Reverend.
Yeah, I just looked up some notes here, and like Dina noted, there's a question about could we use Facebook and ways to social media approaches to promote this and get the information out. I think it's kind of too soon to say, but there's kind of a question about like what's the organ or how are we going to implement this? Like there doesn't seem to be a budget, so would it just be a list that we hope people implement? Would there be some state government agency that would be assisting a little bit with implementing? And so that's just a question mark there for down the road. If it just would be a list and education things and that's it, or community partners like libraries or houses of worship as something we're just starting to try and list as possibilities. Dr. Waller, Kadi, and I had formed a group to talk about kind of the Indigenous Native American experience and start to list some resources. And I think Senator Khan, you forwarded a list of potential remembrance days for genocides just to have as a resource and to talk about how things like Genocide Awareness Month in April could be helpful as well in forming curriculums or giving some platform to do that with. So I think that's what my notes indicate for an update from the committee, but any of us are happy to help answer any questions people would have.
What are our options for sort of consolidating everything in one place? Do we have options?
It's a really good question. Our meeting videos are on a YouTube site. Gotta confess, I haven't gone to the YouTube site, but I'm going to after this meeting to have that address. Maybe we can drop that. Yeah, Ashley, have you done that? Oh, you went to the website.
But I'm thinking about like as an educator, and this is something I missed the last implementation meeting because I had another training I had to go to, but something that's really helpful to me is I am part of like multiple Facebook groups. I'm one for like National Holocaust Educators. I'm one on the United States Holocaust Museum. I have like an English teacher one, and it's sharing so many resources. And when I was talking to another teacher in another district who also teaches Holocaust education, we had talked about having some sort of like Holocaust and genocide educators like group. So that way it's really easy to like blast out, the information that we need, that we want to blast out, and really easy to get that across. So I do really like the idea of having some sort of like Facebook page or Facebook group that people can join, whether it's for educators or for the public or both. But I think that that's a really great idea, especially when trying to get trainings out to people and really looking at that professional development piece that the implementation committee is looking at. That's going to be like so important because those email lists are so hard. Like it's hard to get an email list for every teacher, right? But Facebook is magical in that regard.
I think we need both Facebook and a website because not everybody's on Facebook. So Facebook's great. I just think we need both.
I'm just saying
yes. Yeah. But so we need to find out who creates those, who is the webmaster, that sort of thing.
Marta?
Well, I was just going to kind of chime in on what Dina just said is that I think it's a great idea. I do think it's a website is a matter of maintenance. Facebook takes care of itself. And a lot of educators, not all, I agree, but a lot are on Facebook. So I think both are good ideas, but I think the website is a harder sell as far as maintenance goes and keeping it updated. It's not going to be a static thing. So I don't know what the avenue is for that or who would take care of that, but I think it's worth looking into, absolutely. But Facebook maintains itself.
Dan?
Are we piling more on than we should be at this point? I think we've got some deadlines that we have to make on getting the statute in and all of that stuff. Facebook and all the rest of it is down the road. Let's get the policy resolved and in place. It's my thoughts.
Thanks.
One other question too on the Facebook and anything with that is moderation and how that would work. Because as soon as you put something on Facebook, if it's open to the public, you can get all kinds of comments, and so who would be doing the work of moderating content and things like that would also be a question.
Yeah, good question.
Well, you can make it so nobody can comment. It can be just a delivery vehicle, not a discussion vehicle.
Well, we've got members on this group that are that have some website administrative ongoing connections, and I'll take the State House, but I think I'll Robert, if I can talk with you about maybe how other states have done this and preserved, allowed for updating, because these things are obviously training materials are always going to be changing and added to, and workshops availability. And I think I don't want to speak for the Cohen Center, but I think they also are in that space of trying to communicate.
I think we need to try and I'm not sure of like how I don't know off the top of my head how other states are doing it. So I can sort of drill down fairly quickly and see if I can come up with some, or at least present some of the options that others are using. I mean, I think in Massachusetts, where I am right now, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has lists of resources on their website for a whole host of things. But to the point of maintenance, I think is also an important part of it. So let me go and do a little bit of digging on this, so that we don't have to sort of reinvent the wheel.
Great, thanks. Yeah, Ashley.
So I have an unrelated question that's not related to Facebook. And this was something I think Brian put on the agenda too that we didn't touch on yet. We are supposed to have a preliminary report in January, according to the statute. This is January 2021.
Yeah, you're right.
How does that work? Who does that? What's the logistics of that? Big question.
It is a big question.
Sorry to throw that at you.
You did put that there. Well, I will prepare a letter on behalf of the committee. I guess I will send that around. I'm going to. I'll put together a letter. I'll send it around for comment. It does say that on or before January 1st. fortunately, in answer to Dina's question, I probably have some space in the next 10 days to just construct something that's very simple, but covers the base that we've convened, where we have 3 work groups. And I don't think there's really much more to need to say in an interim report where we've met twice and than that. Any other suggestions from people now? But thank you, Ashley, for not letting that go unspoken. All right. If there's no, oh, I'm sorry. I did want to, this list that Reverend Harmon made reference to was produced as a result of a conversation that Jim Waller led. And it I think is one of those resources for us to pass along for schools. I'm not exactly, Reverend, did you have anything to add to its purpose?
Sure.
And how you intended this to be reviewed by the commission?
Yeah, and I think, like with the implementation committee, we're kind of just in the brainstorming idea because there's a way of waiting to see the work that's happening with the other 2 subgroups and how to implement it from there. But the idea behind this list was that it could be a resource for teachers, for instance, to pick a day on the calendar and say they were going to do a unit to focus on the Holocaust or focus on the Armenian genocide. There would be a day on there that they could build around, and maybe some resources with the community that's experienced that genocide to plug in with and connect with as well. So it's meant as a resource for educators and any other community members that might want to take that day and use that as a focus for a time period in a curriculum.
Sorry, I was trying to share my screen. That's why I shared the document in advance. But all right, too many things I have open. All right, well, I think it is a good resource. It made me, on December 9th, wish that I joined your webinar that was promoted. Somebody had promoted. Like it was a timely thing for us to have considered.
We're going to do, I mean, just unrelated to this, but we are related but unrelated. We had Luis Moreno Ocampo, was the first genocide prosecutor at the International Criminal Court, and he was one of the speakers. And we're going to do kind of a 3-part program with him in 21. He was actually quite fascinating. I mean, just like a wealth of knowledge. I really learned a lot just speaking to him. So we're going to try and do like a 3-part program. And there was at least one school who actually streamed it into their classroom. So we're going to try and at least try and expand that a little bit in 21.
Great. Dina, you're a member of the New Hampshire Civics Institute, right? I think that's the name of it. Yeah, that's another, sounds interesting to look at the World Court.
Well, it's interesting because we're talking about genocide education, and we focus on people's journeys and the experiences, but there's also an accountability component. And that is, the holding people accountable, which really sort of started with Nuremberg. And this is how it's evolved. And it was, it's really interesting to talk to someone who's prosecuting, government, world leaders of countries who are responsible for mass murder of people because of who they are. So it's sort of interesting. Even in my own head, it was an interesting way to pivot how you actually talk about and discuss this issue of genocide.
Well, thanks. Marna?
Robert, did you say that there was a recording of that we could tune into at some point?
There is a recording. We were supposed. I think we're sending a. I can share the recording.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Yeah, I couldn't make that, but I really want to see it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm happy to. And Katie was one of the speakers.
Yeah, yeah. If you could send that back to the agenda list, that email, that'd be great. That'll get to all of us. Great. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? I guess we could say Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas.
Do we plan when our next meeting is?
We do need to do that. I was looking at January. Well, so we've got the Martin Luther King holiday. It's in the middle of the month. So we could aim for the 15th or 22nd. I believe legislative calendar is not going to firm up until after those dates, but representatives, do you have some insights?
I have none. The 6th and the 7th are accounted for, but beyond that, I have nothing.
Yes, right.
We have a Holocaust meeting. What does the 13th mean for anybody? I'm just concerned about pushing this forward. Let me go back to Zooming.
Well, I think we could, I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong month. I'm sorry. You mean, so the 12th or 13th?
13th.
13th? Yep.
I could do either one of those.
Actually, the 13th would be hard for me. I have 2 civics programs that day.
Want to try for the 12th?
Well, it's okay for me.
That's going to allow enough time for the group on the 5th to turn something around for us to look at before.
And we have a meeting on the 7th for best practices too, so that will be good.
Let's give you enough time, Ashley, with all of your meetings.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tanya is about to tell us that it needs to be on the 11th. Is that
I
what
cannot on the 11th because I have open house conferences from 3:30 to 7:30.
We're supposed
I can't do that either.
Monday afternoons and Fridays.
Yeah, that is the guidance. I was thinking that maybe in January we might have lenience, but no. But you have open house and you're not going to be able to do one on the 13th and the 12th. So we could go to the Friday the 15th. That is the day, that would be the last 2 hours before your extended weekend for school folks. Or we can go for the 11th.
I thought we couldn't meet on Mondays and Fridays.
Those are the only 2 days I think we can meet.
I'm not available on Friday the 15th, so my preference would be Monday.
Okay. Let's, Sonia?
Yes, I can't do the Monday.
Actually,
We're not all.
you can't do Monday?
No, I can do Monday.
Sonia?
Which Monday are you looking at?
The 11th.
11.
Let me check. The 11th, the Zoom is being used at 1 o'clock for a commission.
I'm using it.
Oh, well, there you go.
I'll be sure to end at 2:55.
I think I heard Ashley wasn't available. I think she's
I'm not either.
Oh,
Monday we have conferences from 3:30 to 7:30.
You could meet on the 15th. I just won't be available, but we will have already hopefully met. So I would say just proceed with the 15th then if everyone else is available.
Could we do the 22nd?
Let me look.
Or is that too late?
No, I mean, I think Dan is trying to encourage us to try to move towards the,
Does Wednesday, the 20th work for anybody?
We can't do Wednesdays. They're saying we can only do Mondays and Fridays.
Oh, we can only do Mondays and Fridays. I'm sorry. I thought,
I think that was the guidance that we got from Alan, Sonia, previously.
So what about Friday, the 22nd?
I can do that.
I won't be there, but that's fine.
Looks like there's not a perfect date.
No, just go for it. Brian?
I'm good on the 22nd.
At 3 o'clock?
We yield to our school folks, but you're all present today at 3, so I think we probably have the right time.
Sonia? Is it Sonia or Tanya?
Sonia.
Could you share your email?
Sure. It's SONJA.CALDWELL@leg.state.nh.us.
Thank you.
I
So we're
just,
the 22nd at 3.
I just ask that, you know, for making requests of Senate staff that those go through me.
I've got a question.
Try to manage that. Sonia's got committees that she needs to. She's staffing quite a number of things.
Absolutely.
So did we settle on the 22nd at 3? Is that what we're doing?
I think that's where we're heading. Yeah. That's Sonia. You can see the calendar, and it's doable.
Yes, the Zoom is available at that time.
Why don't we? And so, at the risk of seeing as we still got 7 minutes, do you want to look at February and try and lock in a February 15th, puts us at mid-month?
I don't know.
Well, I need to look at, I think February 15th might not be a good day for me. I need to look at my February calendar.
I believe that will be, that's President's Day. Will be, Arthur, do you think the legislature will be taking a break then? Well, they haven't met at all, so they don't need to take.
I have no idea, and I have no idea.
We can go for the 12th.
Might as well pencil it in.
Yeah.
For me.
All right.
2/12 at 3 o'clock.
Yes.
I just have a question, Sonia. When I look at my screen, for most of this meeting, it didn't show recording. It just had live on YouTube. But now I see it says recording. Has it been recording all this time?
We rely on the YouTube for recording. We don't record it separately from that. So
okay,
it can be accessed on YouTube at any time.
Okay.
All right, we've got two meetings. A report that needs to be done in the next couple of weeks, and at least 2 subcommittees meeting. Did we have one on implementation that's gonna?
Yeah, it's on. We are next meeting on January 14th at 2:30.
Okay.
Jay, what am I supposed to do with the minutes? Does somebody save them?
Sonia, I need to yield to you on that. Where are the minutes that we approve for this meeting? Do you, where will they reside?
I don't know. I'm sorry, I've never been here for this commission before, so I'm not sure what you've done in the past.
We've had one meeting.
Okay, did you elect a clerk?
Yes, Dina is the clerk.
Okay, so typically the clerk would email the minutes to the commission members.
And that is, so that's been done. But if somebody wanted to see the record of minutes, do they reside in any more official place in our files?
No.
Our personal files? No, that's a no.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have to get off in about a minute. I'm just.
Yeah, let's take a motion to adjourn. I think we're pretty
So
well.
moved.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Second.
Second.
Thanks, Dan. Ashley, yes?
Yep.
Okay, yes. Brian?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
Dina?
Yep.
Marna?
Yes.
Art?
Yes.
Reverend?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
All right, Sonia, we've formally adjourned our meeting. Thank you all. And now it's appropriate to wish everyone the appropriate happy holidays. Stay healthy. And we'll see everybody in email and then in January. Thank you very much.
Thank you.